Hi, and welcome to our webinar on Jim2 Banking Electronic Payments, or ABA files. A common thing that I hear when I talk to customers is that they don't know what they don't know. And as such, we'll cover each topic from basics to advanced usage to make sure that you're all fully informed of each section. I also wanted to let you know that these webinars and other short informational videos are available in our Learning Centre. You can find this on our website by going to jim2.com.au, highlighting resources and then clicking Learning Centre. Finally, before we get it started, I wanted to thank everyone that filled out the survey ahead of this webinar. It was great to see what our customer base wanted to know more about in regards to the ABA files. Now, I'd like to introduce Ian, our Head of Customer Services and our very own walking Jim2 help file. Hi Ian, how you going?
I think you're overstating that a bit, Ash, but I'm sure many of our
Absolutely
customers
not.
know much more about it now than I do. Anyway, it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. So today we're going to talk about ABA files and how they can be used within Jim2 for the best effect. Can you let us know in a nutshell, Ian, what is an ABA file?
Well, we're talking about a file being prepared for the bank to use to actually make payments from that bank account to your suppliers, to your vendors. So it's a format. And by saying that you're going to use this method of payment, Jim2 is able to export a file to the bank.
Fantastic. And what does ABA stand for?
Australian Banking Association. It's fabulous, whatever you call that.
Acronym, I think.
That's the one. That's the one. Fabulous acronym. So that's all it means. It's just a format for the purpose of an Australian banking file, as distinct from a New Zealand banking file.
And we do cover New Zealand banking files as well today in the same subject. So if you are looking for that information, don't despair. It is coming. Actually, before I forget, we also have Rose on with us today as well. Did you want to say a quick g'day, Rose?
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Most of you will know Rose from the fantastic work that she does in our support team. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so ABA files then are a way of getting information imported and exported from banks. What are the main ways that Jim2 can interact with this type of file?
Well, we have payment systems that where we're paying our vendors, of course, is one of the methods, and that creates a file which can then be imported by the bank. Debtors also have this feature, allowing you to withdraw money from customers' accounts. However, there are many restrictions on that as far as your bank is concerned. In terms of both these methods, your bank has a lot of information to talk to you about.
Fantastic. Well, we might switch over to our live view to see how we can start to set up the system to allow these files to be used. What is the best place to start looking at?
Well, I think before anything is done for ABA setups, we need to actually have communication with the bank and get some basic information. So if we could pop up to the general ledger area first, and we'll have a look at that. So what we're doing here is simply going into the relevant bank account that we wish to raise ABA payments from. In the bank info area, you can find information here with fields that do dictate or give you an indication of the information that's required. However, a couple of these you may need to talk to your bank about, which is why we're saying talk to them first. The APCA numbers are the key ones for you to have a discussion with your bank, but so too is what we call the bank file format. That also needs to be discussed with your bank.
So there's a couple different types of ABA files, but then we see the New Zealand files as well. Does changing from New Zealand to Australian file types change anything at all?
Well, in terms of the requirement of the file format, so if we can just think that when you make these decisions about the drop down of the bank file itself, format for itself, when the file is created, it puts it in different display so that when the bank actually uses the information, it sees the fields and the information it requires. So it's about the format of the way in which the actual file displays the text. Now, that means nothing to you and I, of course. It only means something to the bank's processors. So they're easy decisions by just talking to your bank, finding out the format that applies, choosing that, and then you don't have to worry from that moment on.
Fantastic. All right, so next up, we can take a look at what's needed on, say, a vendor card file to see, what they need. I think I have one set up here. Oh, sorry, Ian.
That's okay. I was hoping we'd have a blonky there somewhere.
Yeah, we've always got a blonky.
Okay. I mean, this is a particularly important area. I think we've heard some horror stories from people around the world regarding paying the wrong person, paying into the wrong account. And so in this space here, you need to pay particular attention to what we're doing. So here we're saying that we have blonky computers and we wish to pay them as a vendor using the ABA system. So we've added the bank account details, the BSB number, and what we call the vendor lodgement reference. Now, these three areas need your specific concern and concentration to make sure you get exactly the right things, and may require you to have another conversation with the vendor from time to time to make sure that the details are current. Now, we can see them here on this screen. However, you can also set up security, which I think we're going to talk about shortly.
I was going to ask you a question about that. Is there security that can stop general staff from seeing this information?
Yeah, and this occurs not just for bank accounts for vendors, but also for customers as well. So here we're just popping into the tools and security area of each group. The group that we're looking at in this screen is the administrator group, which of course can see everything. And as you look down through the card file section, you'll see access bank details. Now, what access bank details allows you to see is everything you just did. When we remove that and the user logs back in again, the user who's subject to that security group, they'll simply see a series of asterisks. They'll no longer see the bank detail information. So you make your change in the security group. You then ask the user to log out and log back in again. When they log back in under that security group setting, they won't be able to see the bank details.
So they can see that there are numbers present, that there is information entered, but they can't see what that information is.
That is correct, although I might just slightly change that. You could have those types in there with blank information in them. They will see asterisks. They won't see the values themselves don't need to be in there to generate the asterisk view. So I know it's a small thing, but it's about protecting the information.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, looks like we're good to go for Blonky's computers. Where do we go to next?
All right, well, we'll talk about the payment types. And as everyone's aware, we can pay vendors in different ways. So here we're in the tools and setups. We go up to the payment types. And what's critical here is to look across to the right and see the various columns, the drop downs that you can see. Now here, as we look down, you'll see one called electronic payments, and that means that you do wish to create effectively an ABA or an NZ type banking file, and it must be ticked for the method of payment. So in this example, it's a very simple one. If we're going to use ABA files as our payment method, then we're going to allow it to have electronic payments ticked. Now, as we can see Ash is editing there, he's just popped to the bottom of the screen to take care of that. I would strongly suggest you carefully ensure that only one method is ticked for electronic payments. It is feasible to tick other options here. However, that does suggest that you're going to use effectively an ABA file format whenever you use any of the other options that you tick. So I suggest one is ticked and called something like ABA or NZDirect or whatever the appropriate name for your payment type.
I think in a practical sense, whenever we tick electronic payments on a payment type, anytime that payment type is used, it will appear in the electronic payment section, which we're going to have a look at in a second. So from a practical point of view, only tick what you want appearing in the electronic payments section. Is that fair?
Well, yes, and my simple mind says, let's just have one.
Yeah, I like to keep it simple also. Okay, so we've got the payment type set up, we've got the general ledger set up with our bank account information, and we have the bank account information on the vendor card code. How does it all come together?
Well, let's go and pay somebody. So in this case, we're going to pop up to accounts and creditors. We'll go and have a look for any of the creditors that we like. Now, just keep in mind, not every creditor you may wish to have payments made to them, or sorry, you may not wish to pay them through an ABA format. Keep in mind also that if you haven't put adequate information into the system regarding their banking details, Jim2 will still record a payment has been made as far as Jim is concerned, but we will have trouble when we get to the point of trying to prepare the bank file for the actual bank payment. So it's an important consideration. We can say in this screen here that we've paid using this method, but that does not necessarily mean the payment is successful. There's more steps. So let's say that Computer Wholesalers is all good and we want to use the ABA format. We're simply
Just
editing.
to pause, sorry, Ian, for a second there.
Sure.
Would that be akin to entering a payment as being made to a creditor, but then not actually handing over cash or not actually processing an FPOS?
Yes, there's plenty of people that we know who might say in their accounting information that they've paid a supplier in terms of writing the check out and then not actually deliver the check. So from Jim2's point of view, when you say you've made a payment, it accepts that you have. If you never deliver that check, if you never complete the ABA, then of course the supplier hasn't received the money.
An important distinction. Thank you. So let's pretend we've made a payment. Where to next?
Okay, so we'll do the payment on the screen right now. So if we can go to edit.
Absolutely.
Right. You'll notice up the top there, there's a few things. Anyone who's made payments understands the fact that the date that's entered up there is saying the date that we're making the payment. Now that is according to the general ledger. It's according to the terms for the vendor. It's not necessarily when the bank will hand the money over. So please understand that's a Jim date. Now we're saying today we're going to make this payment and we're going to take it from that bank account. Now that bank account that Ashley is choosing needs to be a bank account that is set up for ABA payments. Please note that. So if you're going to have ABA payments only out of one account, that must be the account that you choose at this level. Below that, Ashley's choosing the payment method and he's saying paid by. So we're going to say ABA files. We can have a check number, and of course that's up to you if you want to document some entry in that field, but underneath we're going to choose an amount and we're going to pay $500. Which invoice would you like to clear $500 off?
Probably the one for $500, I'd say, Ian.
Sounds like a great idea. It's a very old invoice. So we'll just go to the paid now field just adjacent to the $500. And give it a double click or type it. That's it. Now, having done that, you can see it's just the normal allocation of payment, and we can now go to save. Terrific. Now, those of you who use creditors and understand their payment screen, we've now cleared that debt because we've said that we've paid it. But as I mentioned before, at this point, that's in Jim we've paid it. We haven't as yet taken the money from the bank.
Fantastic.
So now I gather we'll go to our electronic payment screen. Okay.
Here we are.
Now, can I just ask you to click edit for a second there?
Absolutely.
Right. And that just updated some information here for us. So what it's showing us originally was where you'd last had a view of this screen. As soon as you clicked edit, you can see that it's picked up the details for this second payment. Now that payment in particular, both of those values are in red text. The red text or red font is telling us that we don't have sufficient banking details on the Computer Wholesalers card file to actually record this payment and in terms of the bank file. Red's not good. Red means we need to amend. And so consequently, we would need to go back into their card file and change those details.
Now that is an area of caution, isn't it? That we've already registered that we've made the payment, but
Yes.
then we've come here to create the ABA and found that we're not actually able to do that because we don't have sufficient detail.
Correct. So the assumption at this point is the ABA file does wish to continue, but before you can use this information, you will need to go back to the computer wholesaler's card file, and you would need to add the relevant banking details that it is missing.
Okay. Should we do that now?
Well, we can, yes, by all means, or we can go to the Blonky computer and do a payment. What would you prefer to do?
Well, let's show how to set up the banking information on the card file,
Yeah,
just
great.
so that's nice and clear. So if we go edit, there we go, compile.
Okay.
If we go to the contact section,
Now
edit.
you can add this detail to any contact within that card file, by the way. So you might want to set up a specific banking contact, or alternatively, you could simply add these details to a current contact that was there. When we drop down our choices, you're going to see different things relating to the bank. And here we can see bank account name, number. We're also looking for BSB and vendor lodgement details.
BSB. And we'll check in. Now, we don't actually have to enter the lodgement reference, right?
Well, the preference would be to put it in. So it's not
Is
the
that
customer.
the right one there?
No, it's vendor lodgement.
Oh, vendor, my apologies. Even vend, yeah. What happens if we don't enter the vendor lodgement reference in?
Well, depending whether we're talking about paying a credit or receiving a direct debit ABA from a customer, it'll use invoice details, invoice information to cross-reference. Vendor lodgement and customer lodgement references are particularly important to make it easier for you to identify who you paid in a bank statement or who paid you in a bank statement. So we'd suggest that you should utilize it.
Fantastic. So if we go back to our electronic payments, I imagine we'll just need to save and then click edit again.
Yeah, let's give that a go.
Just a warning letting us
and
know
you
that
can
it's
see they
not
just
actually
went
creating.
black.
They certainly have.
So black in this case is very handy. It's telling us that we've equaled all the right information in terms of being able to export or create this bank file, as we call it. Now, when you look at that information there, the other thing that could have gone wrong was that we didn't have sufficient information on the actual bank account. If you recall, we set it up and we had to put the APCA number and bank file format in there. So had that been missing, we would have also had an error with some red at the top of the screen.
I think in my testing this morning, I wasn't actually able to even select an account that didn't have that information present.
Right. Okay. Now, when we look here and we can see up on the top left-hand corner, the not exported creditors and the export hash, these are about to become particularly important. The idea of the word export is saying, have we actually created a file? That's what we kind of call an export. Have we sent this detail into a bank file that we can now use from our web banking application? So things that are not exported means we have not created a file. Things that have an export hash means we can actually look up the files that we've, the payments that we've added to files in the past.
Fantastic. So a bit of record keeping in there, as well as generating the files.
Correct, and I think with anyone who's been doing banking in Jim understands banking sessions and being able to drop down and choose relevant payment types, things like that. It's just a drop down of the different payments that you've included. So at this point, we're going to create the file by ticking the transactions that we wish to include. So this allows us to leave them out if we wish. So we could simply tick one, not tick the other, and actually do the create bank file if we wanted to. We can tick both. It's up to you how you want this to work.
And it would only export to the ABA files the lines that were green, in effect.
That's correct.
Fantastic. So click Create Bank File.
Correct. Now here's something else for you to remember. That is where you've stored the file, and that should be a fairly common place. If you're doing this continually, you're going to have a space in your network where you're going to hold these files. And secondly is the file name. Now the file name is up to you. You can call it by date, you can call it whatever you would like, but you will need to be able to identify it in your web banking application. So keep that in mind. You're going to need to know what the name of the file is to find it.
I personally like the reverse date method. Keeps things nice and tidy in my file system. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I can't save here. It must be one of the cloud locations. That's okay though. Okay, so then that file, what happens to it?
Okay, so because it's a file stored by you, when you go to your banking application on the web, you will have an area there which is commonly called import banking file, but it could be called something different depending on which bank. Okay. And when you do that, it'll then allow you to select a file that you've stored and bring it to your banking app. Once you've done that, it's over to the bank to make the payment. It's no longer, as soon as you've created that file and essentially gone across and imported, Jim has nothing further to do with that.
Now, I imagine that import section could be quite different from bank to bank, and obviously impossible to demo here today. So we recommend you get in touch with your bank if you have trouble finding that in your banking application. And are there any other areas of concern that customers need to be cautious of when using this feature?
Well, the feature in Jim is quite simple when we think about it. Just as long as there's a correlation between creating the payment, that is saying in the creditor that you're paying it, and then doing this step here and creating the bank file itself and continuing then across to your bank app. Now, one of the issues can be that you don't do this bit, you don't do the export. And as we said before, that'll tell the general ledger that you've actually paid the bill, but the bill will never be paid. The second thing is that once you export the file, your banking application may allow you to edit the file. Now, for most people, this isn't something they would ever do because all the rules about the payment were made in Jim. It's unlikely that they would ever want to go to the ABA file and actually edit that within the banking environment, or in fact, edit it in the place in which they saved it on their computer or their network. But if they do change it there, then obviously it's no longer the same as the information that Jim was told.
Right. Yeah, I can see that creating it may even be a bit tricky to reconcile if things have been moved on the banking side after Jim's had its turn.
That's correct. And whilst this particular feature is about generating the file, the integrity of that file is matching Jim's records. If you make any changes to it, then it no longer does. So just keep that in mind. We're expecting that this is the payment arrangement that you are putting in place, and that's the decision that you've made, and you wouldn't change it at the bank.
Fantastic. I might actually ask Rose a question. She's been waiting ever so patiently. Rose, I've got a note here about how to do a dummy session for electronic payments. Could you explain a little bit about why you might want to do that and the benefits of it?
Sure. So there may be situations where you have entered a transaction that is not going to be paid by ABA. That could just be a mistake or for whatever reason, actually. And to remove the transactions from the electronic payment session, you can actually just do the same process that Ian just explained, but then save the bank file as do not use. So
Okay.
in doing that, you'll be actually removing the unwanted transactions from the page, but just as long as you know not to use them or to use
And
the created bank file.
And this might happen if you haven't been using the feature, didn't realize that electronic payments was ticked, come to take a look at
Yeah,
it and find a whole heap of
a
payments
whole
in here
bunch,
that
correct.
just don't apply.
Correct.
Right.
Yep, that's right.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rose.
Okay, you're welcome.
Now,
Um,
Rose, you and I both know that sometimes that does happen in quite large quantities of transactions.
Yes, I do know.
So if this has occurred and it's a huge amount, by all means you can export it. That's not a problem. But if you're finding it too difficult, let us know. Contact customer support because we may be able to assist you with removing some of those payments. We're not talking about a small number. We're talking about a massive number in that circumstance. So either way, do the session yourself and export it. The file can be deleted, of course, once you have
Yep.
set that aside, or alternately give us a call and we'll talk to you about the options that you might have there.
Fantastic. So what might happen if we've included something that we then want removed? We don't want to use a dummy session. We want to actually, we've included it in an ABA file, but we've decided actually we don't want that in there now.
Well, you've gone a little too far by the time you move it into an ABA file.
Don't go that far. Got it.
So don't go that far. We will talk about other options in terms of I said that I made a payment in this method. I have applied it to a creditor's invoice. Now, that happens not just with ABAs. It's potentially that you've said that you paid a supplier in cash when you actually paid them by check, for example.
Sure.
Once that's been an allocated payment, there are a couple of hoops to jump through to come backwards if you want to change it. Now, many of our clients, many of our customers would not be concerned with simply using the wrong payment method. Our customers would probably say, I know I said cash, but yes, it was a check, for example, and I'm not too worried. If they weren't worried, that's fine. They can leave that in play. But if they are worried, then you would need to actually unallocate the payment. You'd need to reverse the payment, which is in effect cancelling a check. It's a bit of a jump to go back and redo it, but it can be done. And again, if anyone was caught and had difficulty doing it, then please contact customer support.
Right. So I think that's what I was really looking for there is it can be done, but it is quite a process. So better to get it right the first time, I guess.
Anyone who knows me knows that's exactly right.
Fantastic. I might just clarify something that took me personally a little bit longer than I'd like to admit to understand about ABA files in general, and that is that Jim2 is generally allowing you to record information about things that has already happened, but ABA files are a little bit different. They let you create information needed by a bank to then create payments. So it's more of a forward action than it is a recording action. Is that a fair statement, Ian?
Yes, it is. And I take your point that it's a little different from other things in Jim, which tend to talk about things that have happened. Although, if you think of I'm invoicing a customer, that's happening right now, and that's a forward type of transaction. In this case, we can't stipulate enough the concern about saying you did something, you've paid the creditor, and then not continuing with the actual payment itself, the forward function, as you're saying. That is clearly an issue. And as a result of that, we want you to be very cautious when you're using ABA electronic payments. Think through the process, think through when and how you're going to finish off by doing the electronic payment.
Fantastic. Now, before we go to the Q&A, I'm sure we're going to get some questions about how we can use ABA files with debtors rather than creditors to basically draw payments. Now, it is possible, but it is more restricted from the bank side. Can we talk a little about that?
Yeah, sure. The best information for any of our customers about direct debits from customer accounts using this system is to talk to the bank. The bank will require guarantees from you before it will even consider it. They'll need to authorize it, and that in itself might preclude you from being able to use this process to do it. But if you go through that with the bank and they give you the okay, they give you the information that you require, you can use either Jim2 help to set up the debtor payment system, or you can talk to us at the customer support team. Of course, we'll help you. It's not difficult, and it does result in an electronic payment screen. Just like this, we can see up the top there, for example, not exported debtors. So it can work through a very similar process that you're collecting payments from your debtor directly rather than the debtor actually paying you.
Just requires a conversation with the bank to see if you can meet the requirements that they might have.
And they are reasonably onerous, by the way. So
well,
that's
taking money out of people's accounts, I should expect so. Yeah.
Indeed. And of course, then you are also talking about bank account numbers being absolutely correct, etc. So
Right.
as we said, yep, talk to the bank first and then come to us and we'll give you a hand.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now we will head into the Q&A portion of the webinar. I might flick over the informational. Oh, I didn't even read that bit out. That's okay. But while we wait for some questions, I do have a couple from the pre-webinar survey. The first is, how do we automate picking up due invoices or customer and supply account balances to add to ABA for bank processing?
Okay, well, there are only two ways in which I would think that you would create an ABA. Now, one is exactly the way that you did it, which means not automation at all, but in fact looking at the creditor, seeing the invoices that need to be paid, and then using the ABA method to pay them. So that's not automated, that's normal, everyday manual creditor payments in Jim2. The other way that could possibly be utilised, and I don't know if our customers have had much time to review this or seen this, is the bulk payments feature, which is available from the accounts ribbon. And when we look at the bulk payments, this would allow you to set up creditor payments via the ABA methods, but over a series of different POs or different tax invoices. And then that will turn into an electronic payment session. Now, again, it's not so much automated. What this allows you to do, and it doesn't suit every circumstance, is to either manually go through and choose invoices that you wish to pay and pay them from here, which will in turn put the information back to the creditor screen and will also create an electronic payment session, or import it. If you look at the bottom of the screen to the left, you'll see a little thing called script name, and that's where we can import into this screen information that's coming from a spreadsheet, where the same fields are populated in the spreadsheet and are simply moved into this screen. Now, bulk payments isn't used by many people. Most of our customers would utilise paying the creditors directly by going to the creditor screen and making the payment and allocating it to the invoices.
Right. How do we automate or efficiently amend remittance info or automate remittance data back to suppliers once they've been paid by the ABA file?
But this is a common question, but please understand that remittances in Jim are driven by the payment record in Jim, not by the payment by the bank. In other words,
right.
I can pay from a creditor and send a remittance. However, if that payment doesn't go through the bank today and it goes through tomorrow or the next day based on the electronic payment systems we've discussed, then it won't be triggering the remittance. Jim, the payment record in Jim is what does the remittance. So you have the email functionalities to send remittances out of Jim2, but as I said, they'll correlate only to the Jim2 payment record, not to the bank's actual payment date or time.
Makes sense. Okay, do we have any questions come through the Q&A? No questions as yet. So we might wait a couple to see if anything comes through. I'll pop that information back on the screen about how we can, how you can get in touch with us should you need to. Yeah. I should have maybe had a subject lined up to talk about, Ian.
Well, maybe we do. Maybe we do.
Okay.
One of the features that's been very well accepted in Jim2 has been the bank feeds. And I just wanted to draw to your attention that when you look in bank feeds, it's going to provide for you from your bank the transactions that you can match up against payments to creditors. In Jim2, if you're if you were using the ABA file only in the bank, not in terms of Jim. So in other words, think about, I've gone to my bank application and I have paid my creditor from there. I haven't told Jim about it. That transaction would show in a bank feed coming back to Jim2, in which case you could then not match it up because, of course, there hadn't been a payment in Jim. You would actually have to create a new payment in the creditor section. That then should not be an electronic payment type. You've already paid them through the bank, so we don't want you to loop that around and say you're going to make another electronic payment.
Well, that would cause it to show in the electronic banking session, right?
Correct. So just be cautious if you ever do it that way. So what we're talking about there is clearly not what we were talking about when we started this webinar. I was saying there, if you went to your bank and used electronic payments or ABA files, as distinct from using Jim to do it. So right. Let me just suggest, use Jim. If you're going to use ABAs, use Jim to generate. That way there's no confusion.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions popped in. This one's from Vivian. The vendor lodgement reference, is that provided by the bank to the vendor? Or is that something that we would need, or say we, the customer, would need to seek from the bank?
I'll just talk to Rose a little bit in terms of alternatives. I mean, normally it's the reference of the customer being understood by of you as the Jim2 user being the customer of that supplier and the account number. Rose,
it's
is there
for
another
your
source?
reference to know where that comes from. Or are we talking about the the other number that was in the banking info on the GL?
It's for the customer, it's for the person receiving the payment to understand where the payment has come from.
Yeah, right. That's right. So it's like for them to identify that you've made the payment.
Okay, that makes sense. I hope that answers the question, Vivian. Please let us know if you need a little bit more info. Beck has just asked, will they manually amend subject lines in email signatures, etc. for remittances? Can this be done in bulk? And how do they amend the template?
Yes, certainly. I think that's definitely a customer support question, Beck. You can amend your templates for sending the remittances. So if you'd just like to make contact with us, we'll talk through your specific requirements and if we can assist you either with macros or with just straight out text entries that can go into the templates. We'll do that.
I'll just make a note here that she's also asked for a run through of the bulk payment example. We might make a job and get back to you on that, as we weren't quite set up for doing that on the webinar, sure. If that's okay, Beck. Okay, so Daniel has asked, does the payment amount come through as a single transaction for the bank feed if multiple payments have been made to the vendor?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure of the circumstance with those, whether we do them, whether the transaction in the bank comes through as one or more. It's the bank transaction that matters here. So as far as the bank records it, that's how the feed would then feed that back to us.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got one from Kay. What is the best practice for post-dated transactions when we want to create a bank file today but want the actual bank payment to go tomorrow?
Sure. So it's an increasingly common question for people to want to actually have that payment made after the event. And of course, you can control it manually by not doing the electronic payment export until the date that you wish. We also have other methods, including custom scripting, that can be used for you to get the advantage of being able to do that. That applies both to debtor payments and creditor payments. Custom scripting can be used, but we want to talk to you about what the circumstances are and how you wish to use that.
Right. Is that something we might get back to Kay offline about, or?
I just think the request comes through to support@happen.biz, and as soon as we see that there, we'll respond. There are different terms and requirements here, which is why we don't give a single answer,
Right.
particularly in relation to debtor payments. So that's why we'd prefer to have an ongoing conversation with the individual customers to work out what's required.
And the last one here is Laura just also registering interest about how to do bulk payments. I don't know, Ian, maybe that can be another webinar.
Well, it could be. I would highlight, if you have a look at Jim2 Help, you will find a really good article on how to use bulk payments. And bulk payments are not just about debtors, they're also about creditors. So you can find information in there in the Jim2 Help that takes you through how to set it up, how to choose, etc. Right at the bottom, there's also linked topics for this, just as we do for all our Jim2 Help articles. And they assist you with working out other related topics. Look, it's a great way if you're, depending on how you're paid by your debtors, and also depending on whether or not you can clearly work out how many invoices to pay in one session without going to the creditor record specifically.
Okay, we've got a question from Shanika. When we send bulk remittances through the checkbook option with the remittances list, how can we exclude certain creditors? That one's a little off topic, but are we able to answer that one?
No, I'm not able to answer that one at the moment.
That's okay. We might then just take note of that and get back to you offline, Shanika, if that's okay.
I just noticed there, Shanika, you're talking about the checkbook as distinct from creditors. So happy to talk to you about what that means and how you do your payments. Checkbook being a little different from using the creditor system to pay.
Right. Final call for questions. I think that's all that's come through so far. Silence may well be golden. Well, if you do have any further questions about anything that we've discussed today, please do reach out to us at support and we'll do everything we can to get you the information that you're looking for. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Rose. And we'll catch you at the next webinar.
Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.